So first of all, I would like to um, review the vegetation and why I would like to study the aquatic vegetation and then move to the vegetation modeling theory. And I will illustrate a test case to validate our FDC modeling result and show you how to manipulate the open channel the case with the vegetated channel, and then we can do some scenario modeling. For example, increase the vegetation density and decrease the density, and also we can decrease the vegetation height and see how the total shear base stress change. So here, as before, you can see how the GUI, the guide for the vegetation, and then we can look at the vegetation theory in our model. So why we would like to study aquatic vegetation? Because the vegetation can affect the and the turbulence flow, the structure in an open channel or a coastal environment, like especially in estuary and the nearshore area, and the vegetation can reduce the sediment, the low potential, and reduce the nearby the shear stress. And also vegetation can alter floodplain coverancy and also can affect contaminate transport. And here is the picture I done from NOAA, and we can see the soil moss can protect the shoreline erosion. So here is the conceptual framework of vegetation. So here is our water column, and usually if you don't have the vegetation, then your velocity flow will follow the boundary layer. But if you have the vegetation, the structure here, you will significantly affect the flow structure. So for example, you will see the velocity here will reduce the velocity, and here is the flow, the profile velocity, and depending on how the vegetation structure, then you will see different the viscous, the drag or foam drag dominant, and also of course the vegetation height will affect the flow structure. So mainly the velocity category we will split to the three parts according to the vegetation property. For example, in the wetland you will see the very rigid the vegetation. For example, the soil marsh is a very rigid, and some is the seagrass is the very flexible. And in our model, we assume it's a rigid vegetation in our model. And like Tom mentioned before, if you take the vegetation as a rigid, you can simulate the bridge and in the flow, and then you can see some scar happen around the bridge. Then according to the vegetation density, you will see like a sparse and the dense the vegetation will affect the flow structure. For example, for sparse, the density, then you will take the vegetation as the cylinder. So you will see the stem scale turbulence will happen around each individual plant. But if it's a dense, the vegetation, you will look at the whole vegetation body as a canopy scale. The turbulence will happen. And the third one is the depending on the vegetation height. So some is submerged. So for previous research, we just take the vegetation as the roughness, because the submerged is like a roughness, the characteristics. But some research right now, current research, we will very focus on the emergent vegetation because, for example, if you take the vegetation as a large scale, like a tsunami, so in 2011, the Tohoku, the tsunami happened, but they planned the micro along the near shore. So it's the first natural ridge to attenuate the tsunami in the near shore. So this is why emergent vegetation is very important for the recent research. And if you see the emergent vegetation, you will see the wake turbulence very dominant. And the submerged vegetation, you will see the shear layer on the top of the submerged vegetation. So here is about, we would like to discuss the different density of vegetation. So if this is the sparse vegetation, then you will see the velocity profile will follow the boundary layer, and the turbulence is the element scale. But when you increase the density, you will find out the flow structure change, and then there are canopy scale turbulence will happen in the on the top of the canopy. So here is a very typical the shear layer. So it's a vortex. So and also it's a pairing. So the vortex pairing scenario will happen was observed in the laboratory experiment in the dense vegetation case. So next one, I would like to illustrate the littoral zone. So when the wave propagate into the near shore, and here is an example about the submerge. So submerge is the vegetation height is below the water elevation. But if the vegetation is higher, like salt marsh and the different species of vegetation playing in the wetland, then you will see the vegetation height is pretty tall and like near the emergent. And here is showing the emergent the vegetation, so it's much higher than the seagrass the vegetation. Then you will sound like a sediment transport in the coastal zone. Then here is the picture showing the sediment around the bottom of the vegetation. Then there's a very important phenomena. So the nutrient and the sediment mixing will in the emergent the vegetation part because they will reduce the shear stress and then they will reduce the resuscitation in this area. So the nutrient and the sediment will mixing in the coastal region. Then here I would like to show the different the vegetation height, like emergent, submerged, and the near emergent, and here's the emergent part. Then you will see, for example, so this two figure here is the emergent. The TKE is a turbulence kinetic energy budget. So you will see different turbulence opponent in this the figure. So the total summation of the mean shear production and the wake production and the dissipation rate and the turbulence transport and the residual, the total summation should be 0. So in this emergent case, so you will find out the wake production is dominant. So for the whole the vertical profile, and there are some like a shear production due to the roughness, and then the dissipation rate is a balance with the wake production. So here is the emergent case. You will see the wake turbulence, the scale is a very important emergent part. And for the submerged the case, so the y-axis, so the z is the water depth. So if the water depth is equal to the canopy depth, then the 1 is equal to top of the canopy. So in this case, you will see the wake production and the shear production is equivalent, and especially near the top the canopy, their maximum the wake production will happen, and at the top of the canopy, then you will find out the maximum the shear production. Then dissipation rate is equal to the shear production plus the wake production, and above the canopy, you will find out the turbulent transport. So here is a represent the shear production contribute to the transport the turbulence. And there are some like a residual is equal to pressure transport above the canopy. So next one, I will move to the vegetation modeling theory in our model. So previous lecture, you will see, oh, okay, this is the momentum equation in the x direction. So then this component is showing the vegetative the drag force, and it's many function of the coefficient drag coefficient and the projected the vegetation, the normal to the floor the area per unit the horizontal area. So the drag coefficient is very important here because it's a function of vegetation height, vegetation density, and for many focus, and also for if you are in the coastal area, and also is a function of the wavelength and the wavelength and the wave number. So it's very complicated for the for drag friction in the modeling. So here is the test case. So I will investigate the open channel case is a vegetated channel to validate our model. So we show this case is the laboratory experiment conducted by Patient and Rolf in 1985. So they were the first considered to verify the capability of the model to simulate the shallow flow hydrodynamic due to the vegetation. So this experiment was carried on in the open channel is 25.5 meter, and the channel width is 1 meter. So here is the cross section. So you will see the vegetated the floor plant, and also here is the main channel, and the water elevation is 20 centimeter, and the vegetation height is around 8 centimeter. So I will show you in our model how do we set up this experiment. So first of all, we will build up the flood plane and the main channel, the bathymetry, and also the 3 dimension is 25.5 meter, and the width is 1 meter, and you have a different slope, and also the vegetation parameter, the vegetation height, vegetation diameter, vegetation density in our model. So next, the hands-on materials, you will learn how to build up the bathymetry of the floodplain and the slope and the main channel. Then you will show the 2D edge view in our model. Then once you build up the bathymetry and the water depth, then you can specify which grid you would like to apply to the vegetation. And we will give you the flood plan, the vegetation, the file. Then if you and this one, then you can choose the vegetation property, and then there's a vegetation class, and then you will know where is the vegetation class. If it's showing 1, it means there's a vegetation on the flood plan. If the value is 0, it means no vegetation. And if you go to the modules and the right mouse click, then you can modify the vegetation, the parameters like the density, diameter, height. So next, the scenario modeling, we will try to um, decrease and increase the vegetation density, and also we will try to reduce the vegetation height. So here some like a parameter. The unit is the 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 area per how many per area how many stem in this in our model, and also D is the stem diameter, so it's a 1.2 centimeter. So it's a very thin the vegetation, and here is some like a depth factor, and then we set up is a 0 because typical is a 0.78 for the cattails and the grasses. And here is the result. If your model is correct setup everything, bathymetry and the vegetation setup. For example, I will pick up one cell in the vegetation part because the red color showing the vegetation, and the green line, the x-axis is the time, and 15 minutes, and the y-axis is the total batch shear stress. Then the green line is showing our original case compared with the laboratory work. Once you increase the vegetation, the density is I call the high density, then you will see the total batch shear will be reduced. Makes sense. And if you decrease the density, then the total batch stress will higher than the other two cases. And another one is that I would like to decrease the vegetation height, then of course this one will increase the total batch shear stress.